Welcome to another episode of the Sage Holistic Show. I'm Emily Sellis, your host, and today I'm bringing you another episode from one of our holistic healers of Orange County, Christine Morgenstern-Shin. She is going to be talking about reclaiming your sacred balance, freeing yourself from chronic stress, and understanding all of this through the lens of your three brains. There's always incredible things to learn. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Leave a message in the comments below. Let me know what is your takeaway, what's sticking out for you, and we'll see you next time.
Sage is a 501c3 nonprofit organization building community by providing education and counseling about physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. We encourage all of our listeners to find their own path to what holistic wellness means to you.
Thank you, Emily, for inviting me to speak. I'm very excited to be here. I'm a functional nutrition practitioner and a therapeutic movement specialist for mental health, and also mindset and resilience coach. And I combine these modalities, the West and the East, really focusing on the clinical science and then the soul aspect, because I really feel the combination is extremely helpful and empowering for my clients. My clients are typically high achievers, the high performers, the overthinkers, the recovering perfectionists, the ones that just go, go, go. And then I also work with some teens with anxiety and depression. And so we're going to be diving into the two worlds, right? So we're going to be speaking a little about modern neuroscience, principles of functional medicine, and Eastern ancient traditions. And that's a lot of heavy topics. So I've decided to keep it pretty high level, wanting to make this very interactive. So if you don't have any background noise, please unmute yourselves or just be ready to unmute, because I'm going to ask questions in between. And then also I'd love for you to just ask your questions as they come along. Does that make sense? So to kick us off, I always like to just ground and center, but in the essence of time, I'd love for us to do it just verbally. So if you all would just take turns, just a few or as many as you'd like, just to say one thing that you're grateful for, just to bring us down into this moment. Just one thing. It could be pretty simple.
I'm grateful for my health.
Awesome.
Animals.
Family.
Animals, family, beautiful.
My resilience.
I love that. I can't see all of you, but I love that.
Being warmed by the sun.
Oh, awesome. And just you saying that, think about it. Anchoring our mind to an appreciation or to gratitude, just doing that without us even taking the time to breathe in a certain way, right? That just brings us down. It titrates us down a little notch into just calming our nervous system a little, right? And that was just, to me, just a great example to start us off. So we're going to be diving into the three brains. And my first question is, how many of you know that we actually do have three brains? No? Yes? Okay. So those of you that do know this, and if you don't, you can guess, where do you think our three brains are in our body? There's literally three separate organs that independently operate. Does anyone have any guesses?
I do.
Go for it.
So the actual brain, the stomach, and the heart.
Whoever said that, is that Shelby?
Carrie.
No, but that's what I was going to.
Okay. I can't see all of you. So, oh no, that's beautiful. Nailed it. You nailed it. So we have the cephalic brain, which is your head brain. We have the cardiac brain, which is our heart brain. And then we have the enteric brain for the enteric nervous system, which is our gut brain. And it's wild that our latest neuroscience have said that they are three independently acting brains. And the fascinating thing that I think is it's a very much sophisticated system, each organ, and that there's sensory neurons, there's motor neurons, there's your neurotransmitters, your ganglia cells, and they all work together to either receive information, send information. They can actually store the information and then access it again. So it's pretty wild. And when somebody is very healthy, typically your three brains are aligned, okay? Now, moving to our different thoughts. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of us didn't know this is because think about it, us as Westerners, I mean, the head brain, it's responsible for speech, conscious thoughts, and a myriad of other complex functions that we use every day. But the heart and the gut, they literally send more information up to the brain than they receive it. And from an Eastern modality lens, they have been, what we're just finding out recently, they have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. So think about it, in Chinese medicine, they're using the meridians to harmonize the three brains. In yoga, I gave the example of the gunas, and not understanding what the gunas are, that's okay. It's their three energy centers. But the point is, we use different modalities through Eastern traditions, and I use this in my practice, whether it's the qualities of someone's personality, the seasons of the year, the time of day, the elements, specifically fire, air, water, earth, and space. We use all of this, and this is through my training through yoga therapy. We also look at the 5 layers of the body. And what that is for me through the yoga therapy lens is physical, the emotions, the mental/intellect, your breath, the prana, and then your personality. And then I round it off with the principles of functional medicine, which we're going to dive into today. There's 8 body systems. And when these 8 body systems are in a line, that's when we have alignment of the brain, heart, gut. So it's pretty cool. So in terms of walking into the head brain, which we know the best about, right? I tried to I know you guys know a lot about mental health, so I'm just going to throw out a question. A lot of these might be easy for you, but how many neurons do we have in the brain? Anyone know?
Millions?
So how many?
I was going to say millions. But...
Millions. Yeah, there's 100 billion neurons. So I won't stay too long on the head brain, but our head brain, this is the consciousness of where our language comes from, creativity in terms of our perception. And then it's also a filing cabinet for our emotions. And so I know we know a lot about the head brain, so I'm going to dive into the other 2 a little bit more. In terms of the heart brain, so even if you had a guess intuitively, what is one way do you think our heart brain is unique? Anyone know? I know it's a tough one. I'll dive into it. So one way it's unique. I'm sorry, what did someone say?
Connects with our spirit, our soul
yes,
voice.
That's a great answer. Yes, there's a lot of connection. So the heart brain, in terms of it's essentially the seat of our emotional center. So whoever said that is very much correct. It's understood that it's the birthplace of love, and it's ties into all our personality traits. So just think of keywords, like I'm going to follow my heart. I really feel this in my heart. Just intuitively, we know that there's something going on in our heart. We might not have leaned into it. Now, a couple of unique ways that the heart, and if there are any energy healers here, this might be some of the foundation of their work, but it actually generates an electromagnetic field that can be measured outside of us. So maybe think about if, I don't know, that guy gave me bad vibes, okay? We might have been there before. Or on the flip side, if we're all in a yoga nidra class, or we're all chanting, or we're all drumming, right? Then we synchronize too. All of our hearts will synchronize together and have that same beat of the drum, which is why a lot of the work I do with somatics, I'll teach someone how to breathe at 60 beats a minute and find some music that flows with that, because that's a beautiful way that someone can titrate down their nervous system so they can prepare for sleep, for example. So within my practice, I'll use, if you've ever heard of heart math, if not, I would embrace you to look at the Heart Math Institute. They have a lot of good science on how to connect with our body and connect with they call it coherence. And in yoga therapy, there's over like 30 some odd different pranas that we can use, different breath ratios. And I'll give you an example from a mental health standpoint. If somebody has anxiety, and just say they have anxiety through depletion compared to anxiety that's heightened with mania, I would actually use two different types of breath modalities. The ratio will be different, the cadence would be different, and that's how specific ancient traditions have taught us to actually evoke an experience in the body if people have two different types of anxiety. And I think it's pretty fascinating that they can get that specific with our mental health conditions. Another unique thing about the heart is that the electronic field is actually 60 times greater than that of any electronic activity in the brain. So, you know, if you look into from a heart math lens, I should say, you could actually look at someone's EKG and see in that snapshot if their heart was in coherence, if it was frustrated. It's pretty fascinating how it works. And there's also tools. I use different tools depending on the individual, depending on their interests. So there's even tools out there where you can, it's called inner balance tool. You can hook it up to your ear, and then the client can see what coherence means. They can feel it in their body. They can see the stats. And then eventually they won't use that tool, and they'll be able to do this on their own within like 60 seconds. If they're in a line, if they start having anxiety, they can pull from these tools. And then lastly, with the heart, if any of this isn't, fascinating in itself, heart transplant recipients actually can take on the traits of their donors. And the stories have been wild. Like a young woman who never was into sports is all of a sudden wanting to watch football or what have you. So our heart does indeed have a brain, 100%. So does anyone have any questions about the heart brain itself? No? Okay, that's pretty fascinating. So in terms of your gut brain, which is probably a little bit more mainstream, what's one way our gut brain can affect our head brain? Just think simple. And all of you mental health professionals, this might be a little easier for you.
Hunger.
Excuse me?
Hunger.
Yes.
Being hungry.
100%. Yep.
Well, and what you put in, if it doesn't agree with you, it's going to mess with your mental health.
Yes, exactly. You're right on it. So our enteric nervous system is actually located in the membranes of our gut and our abdomen. And it does exactly what we think. It does the complex, processes of digestion and of absorption, but it also helps us with the physical body, which Shelby just mentioned, because our enteric brain holds approximately 90% of our serotonin and 50% of our dopamine. And that is extremely important to know if you're working with people with mental health challenges, or even if you just have a little anxiety yourself, or just that everyday stress that I think that's compounded, even since the pandemic, right? And I work a lot with people with addictions, and not actually drug addiction, but more like sugar addiction. I had someone addicted to tea, shopping addictions, things of that nature, more the behavioral changes. And we do a lot of brain, heart, gut work. And the last thing I want to point, and this is, excuse me here. Thought we were on our little gut brain. There. Forgive me, is the self-preservation aspect of your gut brain. Think about it like when we have that gut feeling, in your gut that it's right. Please, please, please trust that, because our gut makes subconscious decisions. And this is all through the polyvagal theory, which I use with my clients. It makes decisions about safety, about judging if something isn't aligned, whether it's a person, the environment, a feeling, or if it's not. All of this is connected around your core identity. So please don't ever not follow your gut or your heart. So now, what ties the three brains together? If you had to guess, what nerve in your body ties the three brains together?
Vegas.
Excuse me?
Vegas.
You got it. Whoever said that, you're right on point. Your 10th cranial nerve. So your vagus nerve, and if you see my pointer, it starts at the top. It's the largest nerve in the body. It runs through the back of the brainstem all the way down to your abdominal organs. And, you know, we could talk all day on the vagus nerve, but I just want to give you a couple of takeaways. So I mentioned about 95% of the serotonin being made in the gut. Well, from a nutrition lens, as a nutrition practitioner, I look at the kind of food we eat actually determines the rate of its production. So if we're eating McDonald's, we're going to have very low serotonin. There's no question in my mind if I'm talking to a teen and I see what they're eating and putting in their body all day, what's happening in their brain. And I kind of joke, but I had a college roommate that would start the day with black coffee and M&Ms. And I just knew, even back then, something might have been off. But, and then on the flip side, as a child, just say hypothetically, a person had a gut that was free of bad bacteria. Well, then later in life as an adult, they'll probably have less anxiety and then just overall general cheerfulness. And that's an important point because this kind of ties in the principles of functional medicine that I use. Your biology 100% determines your biography 100% determines your biology. And I don't know if you've ever heard this. I'm sure the mental health professionals have heard about the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. But even including that in the premise, as a functional nutrition practitioner, I will track when I first meet somebody, literally from womb or actually pre-womb, I'll explain that in a minute, to present day. And the reason being is because a lot of what happened when we were a child will affect us when we're an adult. It might take 15, 20, 30 years before a chronic illness would manifest. You know, you might have heard of people like, oh, he was so healthy and all of a sudden he got XYZ and he's only 60. Well, this wasn't by happenstance. This is, and through the lens of functional medicine, specifically my scope via nutrition, you can really see exactly what happened and why it happened and use that information for empowerment. So do you guys have any questions about that? Okay. So I wanted to throw in a therapy question because we're with a lot of therapists, but what 2 ways, just generally speaking, because I'm not a therapist, 2 ways of therapy we can use to help the 3 brains communicate? Think a lot of it, you know, from here, down, here, up. Kind of gave the answer. So working top down and bottom up. Some of you might have been familiar with the term. So top down is when I collaborate a lot with counselors, they'll do a lot of talk therapy. And then bottom up, because there's more messages going from the heart and the gut to the brain, that I do a lot of somatic work, either via therapeutic yoga or just somatic exercises if they're not interested in the yoga piece. We'll do functional movement and some somatic exercises, because when you combine the 2, it's a beautiful marriage, because combining those 2 types of therapy, it's just really powerful for that. So the last thing I'd like to touch upon about the wandering nerve before we dive into the matrix is the 80% of the vagus nerve communicates from the bottom up, like I just mentioned. So that's why it's so vital that we teach people how to be embodied. And so a lot of the, high performers, the high achievers, that they're doing so well in life, but there's a disconnect to their body, or there might be a disconnect to just with other people, just really connecting with other people, or to their environment itself. So using the polyvagal theory with these techniques, I really teach people, especially if there's, layering trauma. I work a lot with anxiety and depression, and usually there's a layer of trauma there, that we dive into really making this person feel safe in their nervous system. And so I want to touch upon the last thing about the vagus nerve. It always cracks me up, but I do this lifestyle reset. And, a lot of times I'll work with people in perimenopause and menopause, men as well, but they all want to lose the visceral fat, right? Oh, I can't lose my fat anymore. And so it cracks me up because when you go through the process, 20% of my program is the nutrition, because yes, we're going to reset the metabolism. We're going to, a lot of times this is the functional HPA axis, your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal gland axis. Their circadian rhythms of sleep might be off. But the point is, we'll reset that. But if their body is in a state of stress, they're not going to release anything. Forget releasing the visceral fat. They're not going to release the negative thoughts, the negative habits, none of that. So, the other 80% of my process is building that cradle of support and comfort that they eventually become in charge of their own nervous system. They're in charge of their thoughts. They're in charge of making new habits. And it's a little kind of titration process that I just layer in like a little every day. My kind of philosophy is, if I can deliver a technique in 5 minutes or less, we're going for it, because these high achievers don't have time. And I think the attention span, like in this modern world, people prefer that, if that makes sense. So if you had to guess, if your 3 brains were imbalanced, what conditions do you think would manifest? Just guess, just kind of name anything.
Homeostasis.
Lack of homeostasis, right? If
Did
it's
you say
imbalance.
in balance or imbalance?
Oh, sorry. If there's an imbalance. So if they're not balanced.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so lack of homeostasis.
Oh,
right?
okay. Yeah, I thought you said in balance.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
Anyone else? Any mental health conditions you think? If it were tipped way one way?
Stress, anxiety.
You got it. Yes. Whoever said that.
Even more extreme can go to much more extreme places. Psychosis, dissociation.
Yes.
Bipolar.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yep. You're all right. These are just a couple. So chronic stress, obesity, anxiety, depression, delayed gastric emptying, a lot of digestive challenges, cycles of inflammation, high blood pressure, abnormally slow heart rate, and that's just to name a few. So there's a real need to have that harmony. I mean, the people from 5,000 years ago that I'm learning from about the Eastern traditions, they are on point. It's so beautiful. And so now let's go the opposite way. If the brain were in alignment, what do you think would happen logically?
Vitality, great vitality.
Yeah, 100%.
Contentment, ability to be creative, more creative.
Yes, you nailed it. Yep. So the creativity piece, you're right on point. Improved intuition, insight, decision making is better. That mental clarity, the mental and emotional wellness, it will be on point. And then I have a passion for helping people like live longer in terms of the longevity piece, but without the cognitive decline. And so that's a piece, a lot of my clients just happen to be in that age group that they're like, oh, I don't want to get Alzheimer's like my mom. And so aligning the 3 brains is one protection against diseases like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. And so with that being said, I hope you see the interconnectedness of the brains and how having that harmony is so helpful. And, my main focus is wrapping everything around chronic stress for today's talk. And I really think when we're in alignment with these three areas, it can also avert like any type of long time spiral caused by daily stress. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So with the time we have left, we're going to dive into just a little bit about the principles of functional medicine. Now, this isn't necessarily something to read. I look at this as a beautiful piece of artwork, and it's from my one of my mentors for functional nutrition, Andrea Nakayama, and it describes this process that we do that I'm about to explain to you. And the takeaways is I work in all different types of frameworks. I work in many partnerships, and I always look for the root cause resolution. I'm always trying to find what the heck, why did something happen in this person at this moment? And so this is just a beautiful kind of representation she did about this. There's no, there isn't any kind of set protocols or anything. We move through. So this is the functional matrix. And to touch upon the frameworks I work in, I focus on the story, not the statistics. I focus because each person, we all have different genetics, we all have a different history, and we all have a different lens of how we view the world. And that's really important to take in place. Don't really have a formula, everything is frameworks. I go through a process and not a prescription, because everything I do is co-created. I give them exactly what they want to get that low-hanging fruit, get the motivation going, get some wins, and we'll eventually get to what they need, which they might not even know at that point. But it's always a process. It's always an ebb and flow. And then I look at the personal evidence. We do a lot of tracking, personal evidence versus studies, because the person in front of me, they know their body best, and they're going to be the best guide. And so that's why we dive into actually really what they're doing on a daily basis. And then the last framework is, it's almost doesn't even need to be said, but everything's very dynamic, right? Nothing that I do is static, because it's constantly changing, because our bodies are constantly changing. So in reference to partnerships, I have several partnerships in my practice, and one is with the client. One is with myself and the client's lifestyle. It's so important. It doesn't matter what I think is a quality of life. If they think having tiramisu on Friday is a quality of life, we're going to wrap everything around that, right? So really me zoning in onto their lifestyle. I also have relationships with other practitioners. I had a lifestyle team back in Dallas when I lived there that we still work together. And so I'm wanting to slowly, just organically, like curate the same type of relationships here, because we all have different scopes and everything is very complementary. And then I also have a partnership with the doctors, because my role essentially is filling the space in between the doctor appointments. Does that make sense? In my mind, that's kind of where the magic happens. Then they retest, and then they're like, wow, what happened to your levels? That type of thing. And then lastly, the relationship is with the client and their self. And I know that sounds really weird, but today, which I'll announce at the end, I have a new business name and new website coming out today, because the practice has evolved. And working with the client and themselves is really important, because once the client figures out their authentic self through this work, especially if they have chronic illness or if they want to have that longevity of life, it's really, really empowering. So I just want to touch upon this womb to present day, and this is out of my scope, but pre-womb, some of you practitioners out there, your counselors, might know what transgenerational trauma is. Definitely out of my scope. But what I've learned is it's important for me as a functional nutrition practitioner to track even that. So let me break it down real quick. If you're in your mother's womb, the eggs of you to be born is in your mother's womb, and your mom was in your grandma, right? And God forbid your grandma was at a concentration camp, just as an example. there might be generational trauma. And so knowing that helps me understand what I'm working with if I'm working with a 50-year-old, for example. Now, that might have sounded really deep and complicated, but when I work with people, I look on this side here, the 3 tenets of functional nutrition, just very basic. I teach them that everything in their body is connected. We are all unique, which is why we dig into the past, and all things matter. You know, how they think, how they view the world, everything matters. So in the time we have left, I just want to briefly touch upon, there's the left side of the matrix, the middle, and then the right. The left side is your story. So this is your antecedents, which we'll just say high level is family history and genetics. Then your triggering events, you know, that food poison you had when you were 22 in Thailand partying, that's important. That's important if we have a illness when you're 52. The mediators, which is tied to epigenetics. Epigenetics is essentially the positive and negative factors that affects your genes. And I look at it as a dimmer switch. We can make it really positive, make it really low. When I work with people with autoimmunity, they don't have to live in pain. They can dial that switch down, you know? So that's kind of the takeaway there. Does anyone have a question about the left side? I know I'm kind of touching upon this. The middle is the soup. This essentially, this is your 8 body systems. And what I did today was I mapped chronic stress. So I can map anything. I love mapping everything. So if someone has lupus, we'll map lupus. Anxiety and depression, we map that. The purpose is the client understands what the heck is happening in their body. And so they can become empowered. My whole thing is empowering people, having them be not their own doctor, but be an advocate for their life, to be responsible. And a lot of people just don't understand what's happening. They want to change, they just don't know. And that's where that mindset mastery comes in that I have to help them with. And then the right side of the matrix are all our skills. This is where they really can be empowered, right? So the sleep, the exercise, nutrition, hydration, stress resilience, and relationships. And so I want to go that quickly. We're about to wrap up. I think I have a minute left, but I wanted to show a visual of, you know, your heart and your gut and your brain and how that shows up in the body. And if anyone wants a copy of the full matrix, I'm happy to, you know, gift that to you guys. And that actually brings me to my gifts. But I first want to ask, does anyone have any questions about the concept of the functional matrix?
This is all fascinating, Christine. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful. No, you're welcome.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Yeah. So
I want the matrix stuff.
Okay.
That's great.
So to wrap up with the, a lot of this will be in my gifts, but on a funny note, a tree does have a microbiome, and you can increase your heart rate variability and get into parasympathetic by hugging a tree. Just on a funny side note. But so today is the day. My company originated 7 years ago, Couture Fit Living Lifestyle by Design, and it's evolved to today is my public announcement. It just happened to be on the day of our presentation. Yay. So it's kind of cool how it flows. But I'm announcing today that I am now going to be called Radiant Heart, Heal from Within, because I think as my business evolved, this is a more appropriate connection, right? So with that, for you guys, I'm just having a party, giving a bunch of gifts because I'm just obviously excited about life right now. So if you want to learn how to map your symptoms, so it could be your personal symptoms, or you could have a client in mind. I'm doing a complimentary workshop for you guys, and I might have some others come in as well. But we're going to map our symptoms on September 6th. So if anyone's interested, just put your name in the chat or take my email and just shoot me a quick email and I will give you the Zoom link. And you're welcome to share this with others if you'd like. On my new website, which supposedly is being launched at 11 o'clock today, so maybe give it an extra hour, there'll be a stress relief guide on there. And So if you want to download that, you can. If you liked the information on the 3 brains, download the guide, because you also get the bonus, and that bonus, it talks all about the 3 brains. So if you're into that. Yep. And then lastly, I started this week a chronic stress anonymous group. I thought I'd have a little fun with it. So if any of you guys are high achievers, or if you think this type of group could resonate with any of your clients or friends, this is where I'm asking for an ask, because I'm not really social media. I'm trying to get into it. It'd be awesome. I'm basically going to supply them with the information, a lot of information you heard today, and I'm going to have the group steer the work. So thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you for spending some of your time today with us at Sage Holistic Health and Wellness Center. If you like what we're all about, please consider supporting our nonprofit organization by making a tax-deductible donation. To do this, you can go to our website at www.sagewellnessctr.org and click on Donate in the upper right-hand corner. We look forward to spending some time again with you real soon. Take good care.